Madam Speaker, I support the bill. Singapore today is a country with a rich diversity that we value, respect, and celebrate. We see this in our surroundings where we can find a mosque within the vicinity of a Chinese home or a church close to Muslim homes. It's even more amazing to a visitor to find a mosque beside a temple. We see this as our children go to school in traditional costumes to celebrate Racial Harmony Day and learn about the virtues of strength in diversity. We feel this inclusiveness when we get invited to open houses during Chinese New Year, Deepavali, Hari Raya, or even to weddings of friends of different races. Indeed, we are becoming more socially diverse. The proportion of inter-ethnic marriages has almost doubled from a decade ago. Last year, 21.5% of marriages were inter-ethnic marriages. We have new citizens and immigrants setting up home in Singapore, enriching our diversity. We've benefited from the peace and prosperity from our racial and religious harmony and made our diversity work for us. Our interpretation of multiracialism has thus far forged strong bonds among Singaporeans and also engendered trust between the people and the government. Indeed, it is only with this peace and with this trust between the people and the government that we can have an open discussion on amending the Constitution on the elected presidency. There are three major pillars upon which we have built our multiracial and multi-religious social compact and earned us our peace and harmony. These pillars need to be continually tended to, strengthened, or even modified, while keeping an eye on achieving the objectives of a workable and peaceful multiracial and multi-religious society. The first of these three pillars is our policies around building an inclusive society which are both multiracial and multi-religious. Our policies have long been the cornerstones to preserve this sense of inclusiveness of all races, in order to build a sense of equity within the community and political system. Policies that have steered us towards this sense of inclusiveness are reflected over the years. In 1965, when we became an independent nation, the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew made a promise to Singaporeans to build a multiracial nation. He said, and I quote, "We are going to be a multiracial nation in Singapore. We will set an example. This is not a Malay nation. This is not a Chinese nation. This is not an Indian nation. Everyone will have his place equal, language, culture, religion. To assuage the minorities, particularly the Malays who will become a minority overnight. This commitment towards the inclusion of all Singaporeans has been worded in our Constitution under Article 152. It states that it shall be the responsibility of the government constantly to care for the interests of the racial and religious minorities in Singapore, with special recognition for the position of the Malays as the indigenous people of Singapore." In 1970, the Presidential Council for Minority Rights was established to examine all legislations to ensure that they are not disadvantageous to any racial or religious community as compared to other such communities. Since 1988, our society's multiracialism has been safeguarded in our parliamentary system through the Group Representation Constituency GRC, where at least one of the members of parliament must belong to one of the minority racial communities. The Ethnic Integration Policy, which was introduced in March 1989, aims to ensure a balanced racial mix in every neighborhood and block, which approximates the general population. This has promoted racial integration and harmony in HDB estates. Is how many of us grew up, smelling and learning to love one another's cooking, going to school together, visiting each other's home during festivals, and familiarizing ourselves with the significant occasions at the void deck, be it weddings, birthday celebrations, even funerals, allowing each other to celebrate or grieve. Therefore, the amendment to the elected presidency, to me, is a continuation of the policy enhancement that we need from time to time to preserve this need to build an inclusive, multiracial society. Now, who we elect as president must be representative of who we are and what we stand for as Singaporeans. With the elected presidency, the principle of meritocracy applies. We must elect the best person for the job. However, our value system is not singularly about meritocracy. In as much as competence is key, it is also a matter of principle that our elected president is a person of integrity. These two principles, meritocracy and integrity, translate for competence and honesty, both necessary elements to the character of the elected president for the custodial role. However, the elected president also plays a symbolic role as the head of state representing the multiracial society of Singapore, and at the same time, he or she must be able to connect with all Singaporeans. Ideally, since the elected presidency was first enacted in 1990, an elected president of each ethnic group would have been represented and elected, but unfortunately, this has not been the case. Everyone has quoted the Channel News Asia and the IPS survey on race relations, which was published recently in August 2016. Survey notes that while there's a majority of respondents of all races who would accept a minority race as president, if given a choice, most would prefer someone of the same race as them to become the nation's prime minister or president. I do not believe that this is from a sense of deep prejudice or bigotry, more than it is a sense of comfort and convenience to choose someone similar to yourself. This is apparent when, based on the same findings, 59% of Chinese would still say yes to a Malay president, and 75% of Malays would still say yes to an Indian president. In an ideal scenario, people will vote independent of racial lines, but the fact is that racial preference is primordial and a natural inclination. It exists today everywhere. It exists in Singapore, and it exists also in the US, where ethnic-based campaign counts much in their elections. Therefore, in Singapore too, if left unchecked, the current rule will more probably than not elect a president of the majority race for a long time to come. Indeed, just because we have learned to live with our differences and can cherish them does not mean the differences don't matter or the differences have disappeared. So I'm glad that one of the proposed changes that will be introduced to elected presidency is to have a reserved presidential election for a racial group. This will assuage the minorities particularly. I've heard support from my community for this in town hall dialogues I conducted. Actually, every time presidential candidates are announced in every election in the past, I will be accosted by my community with remarks of disappointment because a Malay candidate is not contesting. Of course, it goes away months later, but it never fails to crop up again and again when a presidential election arrives again. Now, these grasses seem a minor matter. Just a small unhappiness, it goes away. PM cited last week's massive demonstration in Jakarta, which ended in violence. It was triggered by offhand comments as part of a contest for high political office. What was allegedly said in that comment had religious connotations and perceived as an insult to believers. One sentence, just one sentence. It was enough to enrage many people. Political actors allegedly took advantage of the situation to fuel sentiments further. Seemingly small things can and do snowball too, especially when they cut into primordial instincts about race and religion over time. That is why it is good that we address this seemingly small issue on ethnic representation of elected president, because it is a matter touching race or religion, before it accumulates over time and snowballs with other issues into an avalanche. The right policies on its own, though, will not guarantee racial and religious harmony. It's no silver bullet. Clearly, however, the wrong policies will destroy this harmony. One policy of the Sri Lankan government in 1944 making Sinhalese the sole official language, excluded Tamil-speaking minorities from the civil service, and limited entry into universities. Other policies came in succession and continued marginalizing Tamil-speaking minorities. The burning down of the Jaffna Library in 1981 was probably the ultimate trigger of 26 years of bombs, bullets, carnage, and suffering from civil war. Madam Speaker, while we have come a long way from the tumultuous time when there was strife between communities, we cannot take for granted the peaceful coexistence that we have today. Even as the government moves to assuage the care and concern it has for minority communities by introducing new laws or modifying them, both the minorities and the dominant community have crucial roles to play to forge the trust and harmony that the government seeks to build through an inclusive society. Inclusivity is a two-way street. Inclusivity would not be successful had the minorities had not been responsive. Minorities had participated actively in and continuously built our common spaces. Even as minorities, we seek to preserve our identity and culture. Sometimes, integration involves everyone making sacrifices of what is important because it mattered to others. This proactive effort at integration by the minorities makes a crucial second pillar of our harmony.